I want to take you back to a moment in your life that you didn't choose. Maybe it was the day you got laid off. Maybe it was the breakup you didn't see coming. Maybe it was when someone you trusted let you down. We've all been there. A moment we didn't ask for, a moment that broke something inside us. Now pause and think, what did you do next? Because that's the moment that defines everything. Not the moment of crisis, but the moment after. That split second where we either take ownership or we don't. You see, life is messy. It's unpredictable. It doesn't ask your permission before throwing change at you. That's not just how life is. That's how it's supposed to be. The real question isn't whether you'll face difficulty. The real question is, what story do you choose to write with what you've been handed? There's a mindset that changes lives instantly, not in theory, not eventually, but the moment you choose to adopt it. It's the mindset of ownership over circumstance. Let me explain what that really means. We've been raised in systems that reward us for staying in line. We're told that if we do the right things, life will reward us back. Get the degree, get the job, get the approval. But life doesn't play by the rules we imagine. And when things go wrong, our first instinct is to point outward. It's my boss. It's the economy. It's my upbringing. It's bad luck. And look, those things matter. Your environment influences you. But it doesn't define you. What separates the fulfilled from the frustrated isn't what they've gone through. It's what they do with what they've gone through. It's not about denial. It's about direction. You can acknowledge pain and still choose power. Ownership says, this happened, I didn't choose it, but now it's mine to deal with. That changes everything. Because when you take ownership, you stop being the victim of your story and you become the author of it. Let me tell you about a man I met once at a workshop. Let's call him Carlos. Carlos had been through hell. Childhood trauma, financial collapse, addiction, and loss. When he stood up to speak, you could feel the weight he carried. But his voice didn't shake. His hands didn't tremble. He spoke with a strange kind of peace. And he said something I'll never forget. I spent 20 years waiting for someone to save me. Then one day I realized I was the only one coming. That was the day everything changed for him. You see, ownership is not a concept. It's a decision. A decision to respond instead of react. To lead your life instead of just living it. To stop waiting for life to get easier and start deciding that you will get stronger. It doesn't mean you're to blame for everything that happens. It means you're responsible for how you rise from it. There's a quiet kind of power in that, because when you stop assigning blame, you start reclaiming energy. And energy is the fuel of transformation. Think about it. How much time have we all wasted ruminating on the why something happened instead of focusing on what now? Ownership is the shift from explanation to execution. It says, yes, that was unfair. Yes, I wish it was different, but I'm not waiting anymore. I'm building. I'm choosing. I'm moving forward. It's uncomfortable, yes, because once you accept that you're in charge of your life, you no longer have excuses. But that's also where your freedom begins. When you take ownership, you start showing up differently in relationships. You stop expecting others to complete you and start meeting them from a place of wholeness. You start setting boundaries. You start leading with integrity, not insecurity. In your career, ownership makes you proactive instead of reactive. You stop waiting for direction and start creating impact. Leaders are not those who have the most power, they're the ones who take the most responsibility. Even in your health, your mindset shifts. It's no longer about discipline forced from outside. It becomes a matter of internal alignment. This is my body, my mind, my energy. I will care for it not because I have to, but because I choose to. That's the kind of mindset that moves mountains. But let me be clear. Ownership is not a one-time choice. It's not a motivational burst. It's a daily decision. Every morning, you get to decide, will I hand over my power to my circumstances or will I reclaim it? And every day you choose ownership, you strengthen your identity. You begin to see yourself not as someone life happens to, but as someone who shapes life, even in the storm. We don't become powerful when we win. We become powerful when we refuse to give up in the face of things we can't control. That is what builds character. That is what builds peace. That is what builds a meaningful life. So the next time something goes wrong, and it will, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what would it look like to take full ownership of this moment? Then do it. Act. Lead. Take the first step. Because the truth is, your life doesn't change when the world gets easier. It changes the moment you decide that the world doesn't get to dictate who you are. That mindset of radical ownership can shift everything instantly. And when you carry it with you, through success and struggle alike, you stop chasing power and start living with it. And that changes everything. We live in a world obsessed with results. It's everywhere. Likes, followers, titles, salaries, scores, promotions, outcomes. From the time we're children, we're taught to chase the finish line. Win the trophy, they said. Get the grade. Then later it becomes get the house, get the car, get the position. And somewhere along the way, we start defining our worth by how far ahead we are or how far behind. But the truth is, this obsession with the outcome is exhausting, and worse, it's hollow. Because no matter how much we achieve, the feeling of not enough comes back. It always does. The goalpost moves. You reach the summit only to find another one in the distance. But there's another way to live. A mindset that doesn't wait until the end to feel proud. A mindset that doesn't depend on applause or recognition to feel valuable. It's a mindset that flips the entire script. Fall in love with the process. I remember meeting a young athlete, maybe 22. He was disciplined, focused, incredibly talented, but something was off. He was burnt out, not because he didn't love the sport, but because he felt like every game, every play, every move was a test, a pass or fail. He was chasing perfection, chasing numbers. And when I asked him what first made him fall in love with the game, he paused, and then he smiled. The training, he said. I used to love the training. The smell of the gym, the sound of my shoes on the floor, the rhythm of getting better. And that was the moment. The process. That's what he had lost. And that's what he needed to return to. You see, when we measure our value by the outcome, we become transactional with our lives. We start showing up only when there's a prize at the end. Because not every effort gets rewarded in the short term. Not every good decision leads to immediate validation. But it always contributes to who we're becoming. The process is where the transformation happens. The process is where the identity gets built. Outcomes are snapshots. The process is the story. I once read a story about a violinist who practiced alone in a basement for 10 years, not for fame, not for an audience, but because the practice itself made her feel alive. The outcome wasn't guaranteed, but the process, those hours of focus and flow, that's what shaped her. We need to stop asking, what will I get if I do this? And start asking, who will I become if I keep doing this? It's a different question. And it leads to a different life. When you fall in love with the process, you're no longer fragile. You don't break down every time progress is slow. You don't quit just because recognition is delayed. Because you're not working for a moment, you're working for meaning. Think about the people who consistently grow, who build, who improve, who become leaders worth following. They have something in common. They've learned to find joy in the effort itself. The result is a bonus. But the work, the journey, that's where they come alive. And yes, it's countercultural, because culture says, don't waste time unless it guarantees success. But that mindset kills passion. It kills curiosity. It kills mastery. Some of the most meaningful achievements in life take years before they bloom. And if we're only obsessed with the fruit, we'll never commit to planting seeds. There's something sacred in waking up each day and deciding to show up, even when no one is clapping. There's something noble in practicing when no one is watching. There's a quiet strength in devotion, doing the right thing, not because it's easy or fast, but because it's right. We all admire those who stay the course, the ones who push through when it gets boring, when it gets hard, when the reward isn't obvious. But here's the truth. They aren't superhuman. They've simply chosen to fall in love with the work. And that mindset protects them from discouragement, because their sense of purpose isn't tied to outcome, it's tied to effort. In relationships, the same principle holds. It's easy to get caught up in expectations. What do I get out of this? But the real beauty is in choosing to be present, to serve, to grow together, not because you're owed something, but because it's worth building. Love, like mastery, lives in the daily practice. In business too, the process matters more than the promise. You don't build trust overnight. You don't build impact in one move. The businesses that last are the ones that commit to integrity in every decision, even when the numbers aren't immediate. They know something others forget. Process compounds. Devotion to process builds character. It creates emotional resilience. It teaches patience, humility, consistency, and grit. Those are the qualities that change lives, not overnight success. I get it. Results matter. They do. But they're only part of the picture. The bigger part is who you become in pursuit of them. Because the truth is, most people don't fail because they're not talented. They fail because they didn't commit long enough to the process that would have unlocked that talent. When you shift your mindset from outcome to process, your entire relationship with growth changes. You start seeing every setback as a lesson, not a loss. You start seeing each day not as a test, but as a training ground. You start to trust the slow burn. And over time, something magical happens. The results start to come not because you chased them. So the next time you catch yourself asking, what's the point if it's not working yet? Remind yourself, this moment is the point. This repetition, this effort, this focus. That's where greatness is born. If you want a mindset that will change your life immediately, choose this one. Stop chasing the trophy. Start honoring the training. Don't measure your day by what you achieved. Measure it by how fully you showed up to the process. That's where the change begins. Not someday, not later, now. There's a pattern I've noticed over the years, one that shows up in athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, students, leaders. It's this subtle, dangerous waiting game. They tell themselves, one day I'll be confident. One day I'll feel like I'm ready. One day I'll step into who I'm meant to be. But here's the hard truth. There is no one day. There's only now. The people we admire most aren't waiting for a moment of transformation. They're acting from it before it even arrives. Most people are stuck in a loop. They believe they need to achieve something before they can become something. Once I lose weight, I'll feel healthy. Once I get the promotion, I'll feel like a leader. Once I launch the business, I'll be an entrepreneur. But that mindset traps you because you're always reaching, never becoming. The mindset that changes everything immediately is the opposite. Instead of chasing the outcome, you adopt the identity. You don't wait to feel like the person you want to be. You decide to become that person now. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I met a man who just run his first marathon. He wasn't a professional athlete. He wasn't even particularly fit when he started. He was an accountant, a father, a regular guy. But when I asked him what the hardest part was, he didn't talk about race day. He didn't talk about the long runs or the blisters. He said the hardest part was convincing himself that he was a runner before he'd ever run a mile. And I didn't believe I was that kind of person, he said. I kept saying, I'll call myself a runner when I run a half marathon. Then it became, once I run a full one. But the shift happened when I woke up one day, put on my shoes, and said out loud, I'm a runner. That's the day everything changed. He became the identity before he had the outcome. And it worked. Not because he tricked himself, but because identity shapes behavior. Once he saw himself differently, he started showing up differently. That's what most people don't realize. We think action creates identity, but identity also creates action. It's a loop, and it works in both directions. If you want to write a book, don't wait until you get published to call yourself a writer. Start writing, start thinking like a writer, start structuring your day like one. Wake up early and protect your creative time like your life depends on it, because in a way it does. That identity shift will drive the habits that eventually create the outcome. This is the reason people struggle with consistency. They try to change what they do without changing who they believe they are. They say, I'm trying to get fit, instead of I'm someone who values health. They say, I'm trying to wake up early, instead of I'm the kind of person who starts their day with intention. Language matters. Self-talk matters. Because every time you declare something about yourself, your actions begin to align with that belief. I once worked with a leader who was struggling with confidence. He'd just been promoted, and despite his title, he felt like an imposter. He kept saying, I don't feel like a real leader. And so he acted cautiously. He second-guessed himself. He avoided tough conversations. But here's what we did. We didn't try to fix his leadership skills. We worked on his identity. We had him write a letter to himself. Not from the version who felt unsure, but from the version who had grown into that leadership role. The version who had already become the kind of leader others trusted and followed. He read that letter every morning. And slowly, something shifted. He didn't wait for permission to lead. He started leading. And people noticed. Identity isn't about pretending. It's about aligning with who you're choosing to become. You don't become successful and then feel worthy. You decide you are worthy. And that identity fuels the actions that lead to success. This mindset shift is immediate. You don't need to wait until the world sees you differently. You need to see yourself differently. And yes, this requires courage. Because when you step into a new identity, the world might not catch up right away. People might still see the old version of you. They might question your change. That's okay, because you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for who you're becoming. This mindset is about integrity, not in the moral sense, but in the structural sense. Wholeness, alignment. When your thoughts, words, and actions all reflect the identity you've chosen, life begins to feel lighter, clearer. You don't waste energy pretending. You're not chasing, you're expressing. So what do you do with this? You ask a simple but profound question. Who is the person I want to become? Not the job title, not the bank balance, but the kind of person. And then you start behaving like that person today, before the accolades, before the evidence, before the outcome. Because becoming isn't something you wait for, it's something you live. You start eating like someone who loves their body. You start working like someone who takes pride in excellence. You start speaking like someone who values clarity and truth. You show up like someone who already believes they belong. And over time, people will begin to treat you that way too. Because they're responding to who you are, not who you used to be. This mindset changes lives. because it eliminates the gap between now and later. It replaces waiting with becoming, and that is powerful. So whatever goal you've been waiting to pursue, whatever version of yourself you've been postponing, stop waiting. Step into it. Let today be the day you stop saying, I will be, and start saying, I am. Because the moment you adopt the identity of who you're becoming, you begin to act like them. And once you start acting like them, it's only a matter of time before you become them. And that, right there, is when life changes. Immediately, when something goes wrong, most people do the same thing. They point the finger at others or at themselves. Sometimes both. We default to judgment. We analyze, criticize, and pick everything apart. And we do it not because we're bad people, but because it gives us the illusion of control. If I can find someone or something to blame, I can make sense of what happened. But judgment doesn't help us grow. Curiosity does. There's a mindset shift that, once embraced, changes the entire direction of your life. It's the choice to be curious instead of critical. And this one shift, it can unlock opportunities, relationships, even self-worth. Because curiosity invites learning. Criticism shuts it down. I remember watching a young leader deliver a presentation that didn't land. The data was solid, the preparation was there, but the room didn't respond. Afterwards, he came to me, head down, voice low. I blew it, he said. I knew I wasn't good enough for this role. I stopped him right there, not because he was wrong to feel disappointed, but because of the story he was telling himself. He wasn't reflecting, he was attacking. So I asked him a question. What if instead of asking yourself, what did I do wrong, you asked, what could I learn from this? He looked up, confused, but something in that question made him pause, made him breathe. And in that moment, something cracked open. Not because he suddenly had all the answers, but because he created space to find them. That's what curiosity does. It creates space. Judgment closes doors, curiosity opens them. When we lead with criticism, we create fear. Inside ourselves and around us, people shut down. Growth becomes risky because the cost of getting it wrong is shame. But when we lead with curiosity, we create permission. Permission to ask questions. Permission to explore. Permission to not know yet. Curiosity turns failure into feedback. It transforms discomfort into discovery. It takes the pressure off performance and puts it on progress. I've worked with organizations that thrive on curiosity. You can feel the difference the moment you walk in. People ask more questions than they give answers. Leaders say, I don't know, and mean it as a strength, not a weakness. Mistakes don't end careers, they spark conversations. And that's where innovation lives. But curiosity isn't just a business tool, it's a life tool. And it's one we often forget how to use. Think about children. They ask questions relentlessly. Why is the sky blue? What's inside the wall? Why do people lie? They're not trying to critique the world, they're trying to understand it. And because of that, they grow at an astonishing rate. They learn language, emotions, motor skills, social dynamics, sometimes all in the same afternoon. Not because they're smarter than adults, but because they're more curious. Somewhere along the way, we lose that. We trade curiosity for certainty. We stop asking questions and start defending positions. And in doing so, we slow our own growth. You want to change your life immediately? Get curious again about yourself, about the people around you, about the world you think you already understand. When you mess up, don't say, I'm such an idiot. Ask, what caused that decision? When someone lets you down, don't say, they're just selfish. Ask, what might they be struggling with? When you feel stuck, don't say, I'm not cut out for this. Ask, what's another way to look at this? These questions aren't soft, they're strong. They take more strength than blame ever will. I once coached a woman who'd been passed over for a promotion. She was angry, frustrated, hurt. She had every right to be, but she was ready to quit. She said, if they don't see my value, I'm done. I asked her, what if this is the moment that shows you something about yourself you wouldn't have seen otherwise? She paused, not because the pain went away, but because the perspective shifted. And in that space, she got curious. She looked at how she showed up in meetings. She asked for feedback she didn't want to hear. She studied leadership styles that weren't her own. 6 months later, she got a bigger opportunity, one she almost walked away from, because judgment had closed the door. Curiosity doesn't, but it keeps you moving. It turns pain into perspective. And when we turn that mindset inward toward ourselves, it becomes even more powerful. Most of us are our own worst critics. We dissect our flaws, we rehearse our failures, we carry guilt like a second skin. But judgment won't get you unstuck. Compassion paired with curiosity will. Try asking yourself this: if I were someone I loved, how would I treat me right now? Then listen, not with defensiveness, not with excuses, just with honesty. That's what growth sounds like. This mindset also transforms relationships. It changes conflict. Instead of assuming intent, you ask for it. Instead of labeling behavior, you ask about the story behind it. You become less interested in being right and more interested in being connected. And something beautiful happens. People start to trust you because they don't feel judged. They feel seen. And when people feel seen, they open up. That's when real communication begins. That's when change begins. There is nothing soft about curiosity. It requires humility, it requires patience, it requires a willingness to be wrong and to still keep asking. But the payoff is enormous. A curious person doesn't wait for life to hand them answers. They go looking, they read, they listen, they explore. And because of that, they grow faster, love deeper, and lead better. So if you're standing at a crossroads in your life, whether it's your career, your relationship, your identity, don't rush to judge. Don't default to criticism. Don't shut down because you don't know yet. Get curious. Ask what's here for you. Ask what this is trying to teach you. Ask what you haven't yet seen, because that simple shift from judgment to curiosity can unlock everything. And the moment you choose it, your life starts to change. Immediately, there's a strange thing about motivation. It doesn't always show up when you need it. Some mornings you wake up and you're ready to take on the world. Other days, the same goals feel heavy. You look at your to-do list, your commitments, your promises to yourself, and none of it feels urgent. None of it feels worth the effort. The mood's just not there. And that's the trap. Because if your life is built around how you feel in the moment, you'll always be chasing consistency and never quite finding it. The day you feel tired, you'll skip the workout. The day you feel discouraged, you'll avoid the work. The day you feel insecure, you'll hide instead of speak up. And slowly, over time, your life becomes a reflection, not of your values, but of your moods. There's a mindset that can flip this entire pattern. It's not glamorous. It doesn't come with instant gratification, but it creates a kind of internal power that nothing can shake. It's the mindset of living by values, not moods. I once sat with a founder of a growing company who told me something simple but profound. He said, I don't trust my feelings in the morning. I trust my commitments from the night before. It stuck with me because it's so easy to feel like your present mood is the most honest version of yourself, but it's not. Your mood is just a snapshot. Your values are the story. When you live by values, your actions aren't negotiable based on how your day's going. You're not at the mercy of emotional weather. You know who you are, what matters to you, and how you want to show up, even when it's hard, even when it's boring, even when no one's watching. It's the difference between the person who says, I'll be there if I feel like it, and the one who says, I'll be there because I said I would. One is a servant to comfort, the other is a servant to integrity. I met a woman years ago who trained for a triathlon while raising 2 kids, working full-time, and recovering from a serious injury. I asked her how she stayed consistent. She didn't talk about energy or motivation. She said, I decided that being disciplined was a way to respect myself. Her value was self-respect. That's what she showed up for, not the medal, not the applause. Her decision to train every morning had nothing to do with how she felt at 5 a.m. It had everything to do with who she wanted to be. We underestimate how powerful it is to build our lives around principles, not goals, not moods, principles. Think about trust. It doesn't come from one big emotional moment. It comes from consistency, from being reliable, from showing up the same way regardless of the mood you're in. The leader people trust isn't the one who's most charismatic on their best day. It's the one who holds the line, who treats people with respect whether they're feeling confident or exhausted. You become dependable not by managing your emotions, but by submitting them to something greater, your values. And the same goes inward. The way we talk to ourselves on our bad days says more about our character than anything we do on our good days. If your value is kindness, that has to apply even when you're disappointed in yourself. If your value is courage, it has to show up even when your knees are shaking. That's what integrity looks like. Not perfection, but alignment. Living by values doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. Feelings are important messengers. They reveal what you care about. They tell you where something's off. But they're not always reliable guides. They're visitors, not rulers. Values are the foundation you stand on while your moods pass through. And here's the beautiful part. The more you live by values, the more stable your life becomes. Not boring, stable. You know what you'll do when the pressure's on. You know how you'll treat people when things go wrong. You know how you'll show up when no one's clapping. It's why people with strong values often appear calm in chaos. It's not that they feel calm, they're just anchored. And when you're anchored, you don't need every situation to be perfect. You bring your stability into the storm. I worked once with a team that had been through massive disruption, layoffs, reorganization, leadership changes. The teams that survived weren't the ones who had the best systems. They were the ones who had values they practiced out loud. Transparency, respect, adaptability. They reminded each other every single week what they stood for. And that culture kept them from falling apart when everything else did. Now bring it back to your life. What are your values? Not the ones you think sound good, but the ones you actually want to live by, the ones you want your future self to thank you for. Write them down, 1 sentence each. And then the harder part, build your days around them. If your value is growth, keep learning even when no one's grading you. If your value is courage, speak the truth even when your voice shakes. If your value is integrity, follow through even when it's inconvenient. If your value is compassion, stay kind even when you're frustrated. That's how transformation begins. Not through some lightning bolt of inspiration, but through quiet alignment between what you believe and what you do. The people who change the world don't feel like heroes every day. They feel doubt, they feel fear, they feel exhaustion, but they keep showing up anyway. Because their lives aren't built on how they feel in the moment. Their lives are built on who they've chosen to be. You can choose that too. Right now, without changing your job, your title, your bank account, or your surroundings. You can choose a mindset where values win over moods, where direction beats distraction, where who you are is more important than how you feel. Because the moment you stop negotiating your actions with your emotions and start aligning them with your values is the moment your life begins to change. Immediately.